You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, everybody, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your barely awake hosts for this show because, yes, we actually had to push the live stream even later. So, sorry about that, guys. But, of course, this is too important. We're talking about the Bad Batch Season 3 just premiered with 3 episodes, no less.
Yes, the series finale, not just the season finale. But
that's
series
true.
Finale.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is going to be the last season. So, I mean, I don't know. We can more or less get into this because Ted Adam Green has already sent something. And then, of course, we could give a couple little introductory thoughts and then, really plow into this. So Ted Adam Green says, I thoroughly enjoyed the first 3 and glad they dropped them together too. Can't wait to hear what you all have to say tomorrow. I guess he's going to watch it tomorrow. You didn't finish the thought, but I guess he's not going to be here tonight. But that's okay because it almost is tomorrow, actually.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, we started this live stream a little later than we planned, but hey, whatever. So these first 3 episodes, it's interesting because if I just had to give like a cursory thought on them, right? It's like the first one I thought was really good. The second one I thought was, character development, but kind of half filler. And then the third one I thought was really amazing. It kind of harkened back to the first one. That's kind of my overall vibe so far about this whole thing.
Yeah, I think the first 2 really were just kind of like for me. I mean,
really? Even the first one you didn't think? To me, man, that had some pulse pounding action and just suspense to me.
Well, the thing is, maybe I need to watch it again but I'm just saying, like, we just basically see like Groundhog's Day where like Omega's getting up. It's like the whole Karate Kid thing, like put on a jacket, take off
No,
the jacket.
you know what that actually reminded me of? I'm going to pull up my notes though. That reminded me of the whole Andor, yeah.
Andor, yeah.
Yeah, that was totally an Andor thing, man. The whole thing reminded me of the Andor prison scene. I also thought it was cool.
Yeah, but I think it's because we didn't get there wasn't a whole lot of information given. I think it was just kind of like, okay, we get the fact that she's, in despair, and of course, Hunter and Wrecker are looking for him and for her and whatnot, and like I get that. I just wish there was more coming into it. Just besides that, or wish we had more knowledge on Dr. Carr, who's also a clone. So I just kind of wish there was some more stuff, just on that, on the relationship with her and Lama Su. There's just more I was looking for out of that first episode. I kind of figured, it was the first 2, well, maybe the first couple episodes were going to be set up, obviously, for the third one.
Yeah.
And once again, it pulled the Andor type situation. But I also felt like hopefully we were going to get more information as far as like what's going on and, how they're dealing with it. Like as far as, they mentioned tech, like, last time we, decided to go storm a place, not all of us came back. I mean, that was kind of, like saddening or whatnot. But I just wanted a little bit more out of those characters, especially for this being once again, the series finale. I just really want, a lot of, I guess there's a lot more detail in some of the characters.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're trying to set things up. I mean, it probably benefited me because if you remember, let's see, there were 16 episodes in season 2, I think. And I left off at episode 10. So over the last 2 days in preparation for this, knowing that I was going to have to try to watch these 3, I mean, I was almost horrified that they debuted 3 episodes because I'm like, oh man, I don't know how much time I have, right? I'm like, now I got to watch 3 episodes before Friday when normally it's just 1. Well, it's good though that I think in the previous 2 days, because I watched them yesterday, and basically the day or two before that, I just was blowing through the rest of season 2 because I knew I had to catch up. And then might be why I had a slightly different spin, because actually episode 1 is very much a continuation of episode 16 of season 2. It ties in together a little bit because obviously towards the end of season 2, we're introduced to the Dr. Hemlock character. We're introduced to some of these things that then, of course, pick up after a period of time in the first episode of season 3. And, you know, it's one of those things that there were a lot of things where I honestly felt, and this is something that actually is missing from the live action shows, and this is true of both episodes 1 and 3, I really felt suspense. I felt like that edge of your seat kind of feeling, you know, for that stuff. And I think that that's why it hit me differently, because I have some notes, you know. I mean, first of all, of course, there's the overall Andor vibes. You know, you see the cruelty of the Empire when they're abandoning their troops. I think that that's a really interesting thing, you know, when they're flying in. And, of course, they crash land, like, right before the perimeter. And, you know, it's just like, you know what, leave them. Episode 1, we're sort of hit with Omega's blood work. It's like, well, what's the deal? I mean, what's not just hers, but all the clones. You know, what's the deal with that? So there's a mystery that's being set up. See, these are the reasons why I really was getting into episode 1, because there were a lot of things. Yes, it's true, it's introduced. Yes, of course, it doesn't really answer any questions right away. It's like you said, it's obviously a setup. But what they're setting up, in my view, was captivating. You know, I could probably just blow through these notes here because there's not too many of them for episode 1. You know, I thought that Dr. Hemlock was a really cool character. Of course, he was introduced in the latter half of season 2. Omega, of course, shows more growth and restraint. You know, she's not as, like, gung-ho and, you know, it's kind of like, no, I gotta, you know, back off. I gotta bide my time. I thought that was kind of cool. Of course, the Crosshair and Omega arc is very much a Star Wars redemption arc. You could see that that's coming. You know, you could see, okay, it's basically a light side character turning a dark side character back to the light side. I mean, but it's more interesting though, because you're dealing with clones and you're dealing with more the military aspect. We're used to seeing this arc when it comes to more of a force using aspect. You know, the Badger story was touching, and it shows Omega's resolve to save those who need help. And then, of course, the ending of the episode, I think, showed a lot of hope all the way around, which, of course, is another continuing theme of Star Wars. So I thought that episode 1 actually had a lot to it.
I like the fact that, you know, I think this was in 1, and that's
I know they all blend together, right?
I know, right? Yeah. It's either 1 or 2, but there's that line where Crosshair is just like, you know, if I had the opportunity to leave, like, I wouldn't think twice about saving you. I was just like, dang, like,
Yeah, that was 1. I believe that was 1.
Yeah, and you know, he was basically like, why do you keep coming down here? You know, it's just like, I wouldn't put this much energy into you. You know, she's basically trying to show him like, well, I'm not you, and she's trying to remind him of the brotherhood that they all share and everything like that. So I mean, I thought that was nice. The Dr. Carr character was cool.
Yeah,
I like her.
without
You
question.
know, yeah, she looks good. She kind of reminds me of a female version of Tech in a way. But because I kind of want to call her Goggles, because especially since she's wearing glasses, almost like Sid used to. But
Well, you know, it's funny in regards to that, like with the way that Omega looks now, she totally reminds me of Chloe in Smallville.
Yes,
That whole haircut and everything. I mean,
the
it's
haircut,
just,
the whole pixie cut thing,
yeah. I can't unsee it, especially because I'm watching the Talkville podcast. So every week I'm watching whatever the current episode that they're reviewing. So it's like I'm watching Smallville again now. So it's kind of it's just right there in the front, you know? All right, so let's see. Um, but the other thing, I'll tell you what else I liked about 1. 1 and 3 are kind of tied together, right? Because 2 is showing basically Wrecker and Hunter and, their quest to find her and all that
Hmm.
other stuff. So I think that in a lot of ways, 1 and 3 are basically, they could have been like the first 2 episodes. So, I mean, we pretty much dealt a little bit with 1. Episode 2, I mean, I got quite a few notes on it, but there was, I didn't dislike episode 2. It's just, it sort of pales in comparison to 1 and 3.
It was a filler. I mean,
Yeah.
once again, that was more or less the filler episode. 1 was a setup, 2 was a filler. That went along with the you're just seeing what's going on with those guys, but then you know, yeah, the vines thing though. You know what they kind of remind me of the Dringear.
That's what I put in my notes. I've got the vines give me Drengir vibes, or like the Dianoga from A New Hope, the trash compactor monster, and even when you kind of see the payoff, even a jungle version of the Sarlacc.
Yeah,
Those are like the 3 vibes that they give me, but the Drengir was definitely one of them.
yeah. That's what I
Definitely one
kept
of
thinking
them.
about the whole time. I was like, I wonder if they're trying to bring in like a little
I know. I
Dringear
thought the
thing.
same thing.
um, yeah. I mean, and that was cool. Just once again seeing them like surviving in the wild, and them kind of like forging the relationship with those 3 kids, essentially, who are like another, clones of them. I thought he was gonna actually like make them part of the crew all of a sudden,
I
like,
thought
hey.
the same thing. I thought the same thing. Like, because
And
they're
they
running.
still might though. They
They
still might
could,
though.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're running low.
Yeah.
Like everybody's been either killed
Captured or
off or
dead.
left or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you're down to like 2 guys right now, at least
Yeah,
in the group that's free.
they gotta raise the team now. They gotta they gotta wait till they become like full adults almost. But
Well, but then again, they're clones, right? So don't they age like 2 or 3 times faster than
yeah.
normal?
And it was funny because how even the kids were kind of like making fun of them, like, oh yeah, oh yeah, the rejects basically. Like everybody knows about them. Like it's just so funny to me.
Exactly.
It's like
I
you got
thought
like
the same.
1,000,000,001 clones, and you know about these 4 little clones that are just retarded,
Well, but
basically.
wait a minute though. So they did. You're right though. I think they did actually say Clone Force 99 by name. That's where it gets a little bit into them specifically, because there were a bunch of reject clones. Because you remember from that one episode, there was like that old dude that they were always trying to
Oh
save,
yeah,
and there's like
yeah,
a whole gang of them. It's just that Clone Force 99, and it does stand to reason because they did make a name for themselves.
true.
So I don't know. I thought it was interesting to see the Deveronians, which we have not seen since episode 4, to my knowledge. They're
What
the
was that the when they went before the when they had the pikes and when they had the whole little tribunal thing at the beginning?
yeah. 'Cause that
Yeah.
was Issa Durand, I think was her, Durand or whatever. And she's a pretty interesting character, and it's also the first time we see a female of that species. That was an
Mm.
interesting thing too. But like the male, they have they popped up, I think, in the expanded universe, but I don't think we've actually seen them visually in any kind of official Star Wars thing since episode 4. You know,
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I thought that whole tribunal thing was kind of cool. Just you know, they had that whole fall away floor, and
it's like a total like James
it was
Bond
very like
villain
almost
thing,
James Bondish in a way.
or Doctor Evil.
Yeah, exactly. Which James Bondish, right?
Right.
So
You start hearing the Pike guy going, "It smells a little bit like almonds."
I'm still alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was pretty wild. And I see that was the thing too. I think part of the reason why, because I would say that episode 2, if I had to pinpoint it, I don't think I would actually go as far as to say that it was totally filler. I would say it's
No.
probably half, maybe if you want to be a little bit more critical, you could say 3/4. But, there's some stuff, right? Like, one of the things I think that was the point to the whole thing was it's all about loyalty. It's all about adding layers to the clones so they're not so two-dimensional. Because if you think
Hmm.
about it, in the movies, they had a little bit of depth. In the Clone Wars series, they had some depth as well. But I think it's really this series, The Bad Batch, where season by season, you're seeing more and more depth. And even a little bit with they're sort of doing it with Andor as well, I think, because it's brushing on the same thing where you're having, which is something that's being brought up obviously in what series was it where they were really dealing with the whole clones rights things. I know the Bad Batch has sections of it to where a lot of senators are trying to fight for clones rights.
Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just one of those things that I just think it's, I don't know. It gives a little bit of a more of a layer to it to where you're actually saying to yourself, wow, you know, I think this season, right, just in the first 3 episodes, is doing a lot more than even the last 2 seasons to really illustrate the plight of the clones, how they're being slowly left behind, discarded, purposely disposed of in order to make room for what becomes the stormtroopers.
Hmm. Yeah, and it just shows how more tight knit, and how the value of a team actually is too. It
Yeah,
shows
yeah,
the juxtaposition of the trained, because like I said, the clone troopers were, I mean, those guys really didn't miss shots.
yeah,
But you're
yeah. The
starting to see the
clones.
stormtroopers. Yeah, they're not really as accurate, you know, and so you're starting to see the difference in that too. So I think that was cool as well.
Yeah, that's another really cool thing that I thought was very, very interesting in the sense of how they're portraying it. Is yes, they're definitely showing you that the clones were superior, but that's the problem because they were superior. They weren't as obedient and they started developing personalities and everything else. And I mean, I don't know about you, but this this episode also gave me some Pitch Black vibes because
Yeah, with
with the
when they were in the
creatures and stuff. Yeah, they're
yeah,
running from. There was definitely that kind of a, or maybe like aliens or something, that kind of a thing to where,
yeah,
or
like
even
Predator, even
Predator.
Predator.
Predator is another
Yeah.
one, or even the other thing that I was thinking of, which I wish they had gone further with, is the whole Force Awakens thing. When the Rathtar or whatever it was got
Oh
loose,
yeah,
that Han Solo was transporting
yeah,
or whatever. Everybody was, I mean,
freaking out and
obviously,
everything. Yeah.
yeah, but it was really sinister and very scary at first. And then of course it turned a
Hmm.
little bit into more of an action comedy kind of a thing. But um, I mean the Mox character, which by the way was voiced by Daniel Logan, who as we all know
Boba
was
Fett.
Boba Fett, as well as other clone troopers. So he voiced other clone troopers. He voiced young Boba Fett in the Clone Wars, and um, did he pop up? I think he popped up in Rebels too. I thought he did anyway. I'm
Wouldn't
not,
surprise me.
but the thing that was really striking to me too was, the Mox character was cool. How he went back for them. I wasn't, usually that's more of a predictable kind of a thing, but I wasn't so sure that was going to happen.
Yeah, right.
You
Yeah,
know,
I like when it's not so obvious.
yeah, because you could point to it and say, okay, yeah, of course he's going to go back for them, but it really wasn't that obvious this time. I really didn't think that that was going to happen. And then of course
Yeah,
at
I
the
mean,
end,
but
the end of the episode, the close up of Omega's doll at the end, I
mhm.
thought was really like, wow, man, this is kind of heavy. And that's the overall theme so far with each of these episodes so far, is that you're getting a lot more weight. You're getting a lot of more emotional depth to the whole
Gravity. Yeah.
thing. Yeah, a lot of gravitas. I mean, they're really starting to make it actually even more cinematic in a way. I mean, I know it's an overused term, but you know, that's just, I think, something like that where you're showing the close up of Omega's doll at the end. Because remember, she had one confiscated.
Yeah.
She had sort of made another one or whatever. It was confiscated, and then Mox and everybody,
Hmm.
they're looking at that sort of like her room or whatever, and just,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, oh, somebody's missing. And again, it's all about that, like you said, valuing the team, the loyalty, and all that
Family.
stuff.
Yeah.
Family. It's Fast and Furious. David would love it.
Yeah.
Vin Diesel's gonna pop up or something. Maybe he'll
Right.
play one of the vines.
Right. He already
Yeah,
did Groot.
he's already doing Groot. He might. I mean, it's not really that far of a step. But
Yeah,
then
but 3. Oh my
three.
goodness.
3 was,
This is
yeah,
this is the one I was waiting on.
yeah.
Man. 3 was awesome because one, they kept saying, of course, Omega's looking around like, okay, there's a whole lot more troopers here than normal. What's going on? So I love her observation on that, and of course, Kara's kind of like, well, I don't know, unless they tell me, I don't care, I don't worry about it. And then, I remember from the trailer, I was like, okay, is this when Palpatine shows up or is this when Vader shows up? And
Right.
I couldn't quite, put my finger on it because it's funny because sometimes we'll see this. We saw this in the films where like they'll have like all the troopers lined up to almost receive the dignitary,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes sense. The emperor's coming. It's no different than if the president walked in. I mean, that's essentially what it is.
Yep.
But like when Vader shows up, though, sometimes they do that whole thing for him too, which I always thought was weird or odd in a way because he's not part of the military and he's not a I don't know. I mean, I guess you can call him a dignitary, but I guess he's almost like an ambassador of the emperor, really. So it's kind of weird to where you put Vader as far as in the ranking system. I mean, we know he's basically the right hand of the emperor, but like everybody in that world doesn't know that, so to speak.
Well, but
So,
there's a good point though, because you're right. Vader doesn't actually get a military position until after A New Hope. There was a prequel. I think it was
because
a
after Tarkin died, basically, he assumed.
Well, it
Did
was
he?
sort of, yeah. I mean, there was a whole prequel comic that came out because, obviously A New Hope is out. He's still not really part of the military. And then, of
Right.
course, he's more like you said, he's a representative of the Emperor, basically. And then when The Empire Strikes Back hits, well, now he's like the military commander, right? All the admirals, everybody's answering to him. So it was sort of like what happened. And they came out with a comic that explains that. And basically what it was the Emperor was like, all right, things are messed up. There's a lot of these failures that have happened. You're going to have to take direct control of the military now. And that's basically, and yeah, I mean, obviously it was in the absence of Tarkin, because if Tarkin had survived, I'm sure things may have continued, or maybe they would have had a more shared role or something.
Mm-hmm.
David joins us.
Speak of Fast and the Furious.
Yeah,
and
right. Yeah, you just missed our Fast and the Furious line.
but yeah. So when as David would say, when the goat shows up, and that was a cool thing too, is that everybody was trying to figure out like, well, who's the special guest that's popping up on the scene? Now, meanwhile, Omega's kind of gotten this information. She's kind of going through her daily routine, and Lama Su pops up in the lab, and of course she's watching Omega get her blood drawn. And I've been wondering the whole time, like, okay,
And that's not Lama Su, by the way.
it's not Lama Su? Which one is
No,
that?
no. That was I actually wrote it down.
Is
Nala
it Namaste
Say.
or
Nala Say, yeah.
Namaste? Okay.
Yeah.
Lama Su, Namaste, Mama Say, Mamaku Sa, whatever.
Yeah.
Looks Um, yeah, so she's kind of been Omega's kind of been her little assistant, and basically Nalase was trying to keep her close because she wanted to be able to monitor, the things that they were doing to, because she knows what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to your point, Eric, earlier, that's the whole mystery. Like, okay, what we know, Omega's always been very important to them, but we don't really understand why. And more, we're starting to get more information. So this time we see them, they're taking the blood as usual, and Namase sees it, and she's like, well, crap, I gotta go run with Hemlock. I can't do my normal thing and just discard her blood
Right.
like normal. And if Card does it, well, she's surely to find out Omega's secret. So now I gotta try to help and get this girl out of here. So she kind of concocts this plan to, hey, Omega, take my data pad, and find your ship and get the heck out of here, because if they find you, oh, you're not
Well,
going
that was
anywhere.
part of what I was talking about, right? Because obviously they would take the blood, she would take it to, Nalase, and then Nalase would just discard it. And then, of course, when she wasn't available because she had to go with Hemlock, it's like, oh, and you're seeing that wheel, and
Yeah, Will,
each
I love how they
scene,
kept
it's
going
like,
back to that.
yeah, they kept going
Getting
back to that, and that's my point. This
It's
is like
almost watching a revolver,
it
like
is
like a cylinder, cylinder in the revolver.
right.
It's like, okay, click, click until you
And
actually
the
get to the
thing is,
bullets.
it's getting closer and it's building that suspense. This is something that's been missing. Quite frankly, it's been missing from a lot of Star Wars projects. But this is something that they've actually turned up a little bit in this season, even versus previous seasons. The previous seasons have been more like a straightforward, not really two-dimensional, because like I said, there was some depth to it. But I mean, it's one of those things where it didn't have this kind of storytelling. It didn't have this kind of depth. Things like that. It's a very cinematic vibe. I hate to keep over, because I always hate it when people throw that term around. But in this case, it's really there, because you're feeling, some, like you said, some things happen and then they go back to it. And you're like, oh man, they better hurry up and get this done, because if that thing hits, and again, we don't even know until the very end why this is happening. Like, we know that there's something special about Omega, and of course they did the whole thing again, M count, right? They started mentioning that. Look, it's just like, guys, just say midi-chlorians. We all know what you're talking about. Stop trying to hide behind it. We get it. We're fine. We accepted it. It started in The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian sort of eased us into it. You can say it. And it's kind of like a Grogu thing, right? Because that's kind of the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I love how like Omega tries to go back and save Crosshair. She gets the data pad and she's like doing her thing, and Crosshair is kind of like, all right, well, you found a weak point. Well, not exactly. I'm kind of doing this on the fly.
Yeah,
And Crosshair's
exactly.
like, oh my god. I'm like, I know he's just like, okay, really. So then he actually kind of goes with it and distracts the guards, which I thought was hilarious. The way he did, he's like, "Yeah, this guy thinks he outranks us." He was like, "I do," and technically he does,
Yeah.
But um, and then of course, he's like, "I'm gonna take your gun from you," and they're like, "Oh, okay." And right at that moment, Omega opens his cell and he just, goes to town on him. But so now they're running around, they're trying to get out, and they had the bright idea to like, okay, well, there's a ship that crashed. If we can get the comms to work, we can call for Hunter and Wrecker, and they'll come get us. And so that becomes the plan, and they kind of escape. And man, fortunately, they did this this happened. So the little jailbreak that was going on was happening right as the Emperor is leaving, mind you. Now, when they first said this, when they said like, okay, well, the only ship, all ships are docked, the only one is left is the Emperor's. Well, we're gonna have to steal it. That freaked me out. I was actually
Man,
like,
you know what?
I was just like, oh no,
I was hoping they
they
were
are good
going to
as
do
dead.
it. I
I
was
wanted them to try. I wanted them to try because it's like, okay,
Who would do
because I
that?
want to see what the one is like. Man, that is just the most gutsiest thing you possibly could do. Two, I mean, if you are successful in it, what is the Emperor's reaction going to be? Is he just going to force lightning everybody in the base? I mean, like there was so much. Would he sense that? You know what I mean? Like there's so much that I wanted to see if that would have happened. But on the bright side, it's like I think they made the right decision
Yeah, they made the right
to
decision
not
because here's the other thing you got to
do it.
look at. Right. Because here's the other thing you have to look at. I mean, even beyond if the Emperor senses it or, any of that stuff, you got to figure, even if they're successful, that has got to be the most tracked ship ever. So there's no way in the world, like there's nowhere they could go that the Empire wouldn't just be on them immediately because they would know exactly where that ship was at all times.
Yeah, it's, like you said, it's like the presidential. It's like Air Force One, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But man, there was that small part of me that I'm like, oh
absolutely.
man,
Absolutely.
I really hope they do this. But yeah, you're right. They chose wisely, as the knight in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade would have said. Because, I also like, and again, this goes back to what I was saying before. It's that attention to detail. This is something that we saw in the first episode of this season, the whole crash ship. That, of course, they were attacked and abandoned. And now we're returning to it. There's a tie-in. This thing has a more linear type of a thread, at least so far. And again, for anybody that might be like, well, I don't know, or they might be on the fence about certain things. I don't know how you could be, though, because so far, this is starting out to be a very good season. But I would like to remind everybody, and I don't know, I'm sure this is the case with this one, right? Because the other two seasons have been around 16 episodes, haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
So, stands a reason this is probably going to be 16 episodes as well. So we're like maybe, like 1/5 of the way through this thing. I mean, there's a lot. This isn't Obi-Wan where you'd be like half the season would be given to us by now.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was really cool storytelling in this particular episode. I mean, you had the Emperor there, you had this whole jailbreak going on while he's present on the base, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until like they get outside, they see the Emperor, like, okay, he's flying off. And then of course I wanted to know, like, okay, I wanted to see what they were looking at. Like that whatever that project was,
Well,
like
I was talking
is
about
that
that
snow?
Project Necromancer. That's what. So Project Necromancer, it's a very sinister sounding thing, and that was one of the things that I was like, wow, I wonder what this is, right? Because obviously this is another key to the puzzle. I also have a feeling that they're going to tie things together. This is probably why eventually Gideon was looking for Grogu. It's probably a continuation of this thing.
And this has been puzzling me a little bit. Okay. So this is the second iteration where we see the Empire, more specifically the Emperor, trying to do something with the midichlorians and stuff to create life and all this crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first time we saw it, of course, was with Grogu. Now we're seeing it with, now that we know, is Omega. My question is, okay, why do you need their samples? You're the Emperor. You're the most powerful Force user out. Just use your own freaking blood, dude. I mean, and there's no reason to. I mean, one, who's going to stop
But
you?
here's the thing, though. This is what you got to look at, and I think this is what Palpatine understands. One of the downsides of the dark side is that it decays you. It ages you faster. You basically get super powerful very quickly, but it's almost like it's destroying you as that's happening. And that's one of the reasons why they always need like these, what they call these like pure-blooded type of like unaltered, unspoiled. Because one of the things that I think that this is a precursor of is what ends up becoming the final order with the Sith troopers. Because if you remember, basically what Gideon was trying to do, what Palpatine was trying to do, they were trying to create like all these force sensitive troopers or whatever. I almost wonder if they're going to tie in the whole Thrawn thing with those like zombie troopers that we saw in Ahsoka. You know, Project Necromancer. I mean, it's kind of like that, right? I mean, maybe this is a callback.
Death or dead. So.
Right.
But
and that's what you had. You had undead troopers in Ahsoka. Maybe they were the result.
So, I see what Filoni, I believe I see what Filoni and Favreau are trying to do here. Because on one hand, it's kind of crazy. I kind of see that. I think the story is with Palpatine, he realizes like, okay, like you said, Eric, with Palpatine realizing that the dark side will eventually like almost like kill you because it ages you so quickly. He's trying to find a way to preserve life a little bit longer or find a source that can kind of keep replenishing his M count, so to speak, so he can live forever essentially. So that's why when we get to the Rise of Skywalker, when you see like the whole dyad in the forest, and he was just like, and it basically turns Palpatine back into like his younger self. He's like, oh, sweet, this is what I've been looking for.
Yeah, I wish I'd met you guys a little earlier. You know, yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Well, that's precisely what it is, because in the expanded universe, he had just created a bunch of clones of himself, which they actually borrowed from as well in the Rise of Skywalker, because that's, Snoke, I guess, was sort of like that, right? And you saw all these different clones. So obviously, they were mixing a little bit of the expanded universes thing with a little bit of, this. And of course, like you said, when the dyad hit, it's like, oh, well, here we go, But this is probably the origin of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that's one thing I can't say. This is what's cool about Star Wars right now, at least in this time period. I meant to say this earlier, but like we're starting to see more. So we have always said Star Wars is science fantasy, but we're starting to see more of the science in this than the fantasy part now.
Yeah.
We're starting to get a lot more of like the almost like microbiology aspect of this in Star Wars, where we're talking about genetics and things of that nature. So we're starting to add more science into the franchise.
Yeah, but the cool thing about that, though, is it's mixing with the fantasy, because there's still a lot of the whole magic stuff involved and everything else.
Sure.
So it's a blend of both,
right.
which is really true, right? Because like we said, like one of the things that I had said about episode 1, even going back to the end of season 2, is the fact that when they brought and introduced Hemlock into the picture, he's actually a truly sinister, like formidable villain. He's somebody that you're like, okay, he's not Krennic, he's not, some of these other guys. This guy, you're like, okay, I'm a little scared of this guy. He, he has some power, and of course, he's basically being set up now, by the Emperor to, hey, now this project's really important. You're going to have all the resources of the Empire. So he's even more empowered now than he was before. And so I think that's going to have an interesting effect. And then, of course, when you always bring up Dr. Carr, one of the things that I was thinking through pretty much the whole thing, and again, she was also introduced toward the end of season 2, but you're really seeing a little bit more of her in this, and she's not necessarily a bad guy per se. That's one of the
No,
things that I find really fascinating about her too, is that she's not, she's not really like evil.
no, she's just trying to do her job. She's almost kind of like the citizens of, who were raised, let's say, who were born under the empire, where you just think that since that is the legitimate government, you would assume that you know this is just the proper thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's just, I think what it's doing is it's setting up a story arc that could be very, very exciting, because, the escape scene was pulse pounding and exciting. I'm like, wow, this is actually one of the most exciting scenes I've seen in
Hmm.
Star Wars. Why can't you guys do this in the live action shows? Because
See,
it's not about animation. I mean, it's just about storytelling at this point.
well, I think that may be the future of Star Wars. It's future Star Wars should be animation at this point, which I wouldn't necessarily be mad about.
I would be fine with it. I would be fine with it because you wouldn't have any limitations. You wouldn't have to worry about de-aging actors and I mean, and again, one of the things that I thought was really nice is that Ian McDiarmid is actually voicing the Emperor in this.
Hmm.
And you could do that. You could bring back a bunch of characters and you don't have to worry about, I mean, granted, one of the problems with the Indiana Jones movie is that you got this Indiana Jones who totally looks like 40 years old because they de-aged him. And they did an amazing job doing it, by the way. But yet, he still sounds like he's 80 years old, though.
Hmm.
It's almost like if they really wanted to, because they created that effect by obviously going through a ton of footage and then finding footage that had the right lighting. And it was really more of a compositing of older footage than what we would think about as de-aging. It's like, okay, if you're going to go through all that trouble, just use the AI at that point to just do the voice. Magic hands, right? It's just like what they did with James Earl Jones.
Right.
I meant to go back and watch it, but for some reason, I saw a clip. I think it was on YouTube or something. Some clip from the Obi-Wan series where when Vader was choking out some of the Inquisitors or whatever, and it was like, you heard the voice and you're like, man, that is just amazing. I mean, it
Mhm.
literally sounds like A New Hope or Empire. It has that same sound. So just
Yeah,
do that with the actors.
I'm really interested to see if they're going to use that when they bring Vader into the Bad Batch.
Oh yeah, that's a good
If they're going to
question.
are they
That
going to
is
use it?
actually a really good question
Hmm.
because you're
So
right. Why
I'm
not?
interested in seeing. Yeah, I'm interested to see if that's going to be the first time they're going to do that, which would make sense since James Earl is basically giving his blessing anyway. So he's like, yeah,
Yeah, and when
sure.
they used it, and again, when they used it in Obi-Wan, because that was the first instance that we actually heard it. And I heard it, and I'm like, man, I wish they had done this with Rogue One. Because once again, you get this like decrepit sounding, Vader. I mean, it's like, dude, he's younger than he was in A New Hope, and he sounds like he's like,
Older
90, because he is.
because he is.
I mean, it's great that James Earl Jones is still willing to do it, but it's like, all right, man, you might need to use a little bit of audio sweetening here or, something like that. I mean, I don't know. But I mean, yeah, overall, man, these episodes I think were really good. And even though episode 2 was a little bit filler, I think that it did advance the storyline. It gave us enough interesting characters. It sits nicely between 1 and 3 because what happens is you get the whole Omega, Hemlock, Car, Crosshair, you get that storyline. And you also get it in 3 where it picks up from episode 1, but in episode 2, well, it's like, well, wait a minute though. What are Wrecker and Hunter doing? And so you
Mhm.
get something there, and it's also advancing the characters, some world building. Yeah, maybe it's a little filler. Maybe It's a little, frog lady from The Mandalorian. It has some of those vibes, but it's not a completely filler episode. So the
No.
question becomes, what do you want to see next?
Well, here's my big thing. So they halted the attack because they said, okay, hey, her M count, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no degradation in her blood. So my question is, how does she have midichlorians?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we know that she's an unaltered clone. So she's like Boba Fett.
Right.
Basically, you know. Um,
So
but, and I mean, I was wondering that myself because I'm like, okay, is it because I remember they were talking about she was special even as a clone, right?
because we kept trying to figure out like what her abilities were, and they always kept her close
Yeah.
and I believe it's because of that. And they were just trying to figure out. Now I don't know if it's because you know sh- in her bloodline, maybe there was like maybe she's related to who was the Jedi, Tar Vizsla or something like that.
Yeah.
So like, is she related to him because he was the only Mandalorian, as far as we know, to sit on the council? So you know is that in her bloodline, or even in the Fett bloodline? Maybe there was somebody who had higher, midichlorians, um,
But there's a
and that got
distinction,
passed down.
though. I don't know
Mhm.
if they're talking about a high midichlorian count or a pure midichlorian count.
Well, I mean, everyone has midichlorians, so
Right.
technically, I see what you're saying. I
See
see
what
what
I'm
you're saying.
saying? It's like it
Yeah,
might not
everyone
be
technically has it,
right. So
but
it might not be that it's
pure
high.
though,
It might just be that it's like super pure and you could do something with it. I don't know.
valid point.
But I mean, you're
Valid.
right. I mean, let's face it. That it seems like they're leaning a little bit towards. But again, and that's about the only thing that I would say that I might be a little bit critical of is like, why does everybody have to have some weird connection to the Force? Can't we just have somebody that's not connected to the Force? I mean, sure, we got Din, we got a few, but even Sabine. I mean, they now they're turning her into a
Yeah,
Jedi. It's like not
right.
everybody has to be a Jedi or have that kind of thing going.
Ability.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that drives me nuts about it.
Yeah, I get it. You know, that's what kind of made Black Widow and Hawkeye special, like in the Avengers movie, because they're the only ones out of the group who don't have powers or some sort of. I mean, neither does Tony Stark, essentially, but he makes up for that with technology.
Mhm.
But you know what I mean? Like they're just kind of average.
'Cause
They don't
he's
want to say
super
average.
smart, right.
Yeah, so like he's super in his own right. Like you said, super rich, super smart. um, but Hawkeye and Black Widow kind of have to. They're still allowed to sit at the table with them and do things because they're just very skilled at what they do. And that's
Mhm.
kind of like how you want to look at the Bad Batch, or is that they're kind of like, all right, they're super skilled at what they do. They don't have to have, you know, midichlorians or be able to wield lightsabers and stuff like that to be effective. And I
All
think
I
it
ask.
makes it for an interesting story.
It does, and I mean, I get it if you wanna take the slant for something different. Like I said, if you wanna say, "Okay, look, hers are pure, and maybe Palpatine can use that through alchemy, necromancy, just general force wielding, whatever, to do something with it to create whatever it is he's gonna create with it." I mean, I could buy that. But if this is like leading into, oh, here we go, she's got the force or something somehow, that's going to be a little disappointing. Again, I could end up being like a huge fan of it, right? Because that's happened. I mean, look what happened with Ahsoka. I hated the character. Now she's one of my favorites. But
Hey, wouldn't it be hilarious if Omega ended up being Ray?
yeah,
I mean, they both had that accent, right?
I know. But see, that's and that's something that that's one of those things that fans are. It's like the people that thought that Mace Windu was Snoke. Remember that whole
Right.
thing?
Or Jar Jar was like behind the whole.
But see, that would have been kind of cool. I
No,
actually would have enjoyed that.
it would have been funny, but like,
Well, no, I mean, not him like talking all weird and all that, but I mean, if he had actually been just acting all silly but pulling the strings the whole time, I mean, sure, on one hand, that might have derailed the franchise a little bit, but on the other hand, at least that's cool storytelling and an inventive plot. They would have to handle that very, very fragilely, though.
well, you already got that with Palpatine, and that's what I'm saying. Like, see,
Yeah,
Palpatine makes
kinda.
it
Yeah.
makes more sense with Palpatine doing it.
Well, sure. Yeah, I guess. But what do you think that what given everything, because I mean, look, they especially with episode 3, right? They laid a lot of groundwork for the season.
Oh yeah. Well,
However,
I think that's the basis and the blueprint for it all. It's like
oh,
I think
100%.
the whole season now is going to be like, okay, the Empire is trying to acquire Omega, and now they, Hemlock has the whole, basically the entire resources of the Empire to do it. Yeah, the Bad Batch is for some trouble because, if they weren't, public enemy number one, almost like how um Hera and Kanan and Ezra were with the Ghosts and Rebels. They sure are now.
Oh, yeah. Well, and here's the thing too, right? Because the stakes are higher now.
Hmm.
Before
For
they were
both
just
sides.
trying to
For both
hide.
sides, though.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing. The
Yeah.
stakes are high for both sides equally because they want to keep Omega alive because that's their family, that's their sister, and they've built this bond together. And she's still a kid, but then the stakes are higher, and we saw that because, like, you know what? They called off a whole attack because we can't afford a mistake of killing this one person that we know for sure that can do this for the Emperor. If we lost that or we killed it, oh, the Emperor would just be furious. So it's just like we're jeopardizing the whole future of the Empire on this. So we can't screw this up either. That's what's going to make this really cool.
Yeah. Robot Chicken would have had to do another episode. Because it's almost, I mean, basically what you described is almost what you think of, who was the guy that had to tell him the Death Star blew up?
Man.
Like this thing that they'd been working on for 30 years.
A
Cost,
couple of teenagers.
like, yeah, like who knows how much this thing cost? And I mean, all the resources that went into it. They had just launched the thing. Like the thing wasn't even, a year old or whatever. And then it gets blown up. Yeah, by the bunch of teenagers. So, I mean, that just would have been, I don't know. Yeah, that would have been funny. But I mean, look, yes, obviously, we want to see Vader make an appearance. We want to see, those are all things that I think are going to come later in the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now we just left off with episode 3. What are you looking for from episode 4 or maybe 5?
One, of course, the reunion of Omega with Hunter and Wrecker, and them kind of figuring out, okay, like what's the next steps, but also them bringing Crosshair. I think that's going to be the next thing, is them trying to reconcile with Crosshair. I think that's going to be because they're going to need all of them, because now, especially since Tech is gone, they're going to need all of them to kind of work together in order to fend off the Empire. And they're going to have to learn how to trust one another. So I think that's what's going to happen for the next couple episodes. Those are the things that we probably need to see.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that I had, was a reunion between Crosshair, Wrecker, and Hunter in particular. I mean, of course, Omega too, but yeah, working through those issues, trying to find a middle ground, or at least agreeing to work together for the greater good. In addition to that, I also really want to find out what is the role of this whole Omega's perfect specimen thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, granted, I know this is going to unroll as the season progresses, but what I would really like to see is more information on why it's important. I don't necessarily have to know every little thing. It's just like, you know, what really is the deal with all this, and just give us a little more information. And then, of course, tying into that, also, let's see a little bit more Palpatine in the next couple episodes, and maybe a little bit more light on this Project Necromancer, because it's like, what's that now? Because I loved, I think it was toward the end of season 2, because like I said, I blew through like 6 episodes of season 2, and then, of course, yesterday watched these first 3 episodes. But I remember that toward the end of season 2, they had actually name dropped Project Stardust. They actually were talking about it, right? So there was a little bit of that. Oh, okay, yeah, we know what that is. That's the Death Star. Well, now you have this other project that's obviously of equal importance, perhaps even more, because the Emperor is like, even more so than the Death Star, he's saying, hey, this thing, the whole Empire is riding on this project now. It's like, okay, well, are you saying that about all the projects to everybody? Or are we really serious here? Is this one even more so than the Death Star? You know, you can't even imagine that. So I would love to see within the next couple of episodes. Again, I don't need to see the thing resolved. I know, look, there's 16 episodes here probably. But at least give us a little bit more either light or just, you know, whatever.
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely get that. Yeah, and those are the things I would really love to see as well. What his big, plan is, and I mean, I think we kind of figured out overall, but I just kind of want to figure out what Omega's role in it, like why does it matter about her M count? What is it about her M count that's so special? Is it because it's high, or is it because it's pure? Is it because, you know what I mean? Like, what is that? How does that factor in?
Yeah. All right. Well, again, obviously we didn't have too many chats tonight because it's, super late or whatever. But you guys, look, there's always a rebroadcast. So if you're watching this, let us know, what do you guys think of the Bad Batch so far? These first 3 episodes just dropped. What do you think? Are you into it? Are you not as into it? What's your favorite moments from it? What would you like to see moving forward? You guys heard us talk about it. We want to hear from you. I don't know, I might even put up a poll in regards to this. Let's see. I'm going to check real quick before we sign out here. I want to check our polls really quick and see like what the latest, because I always like to give the results on our next shows. Oh yeah. So you guys, this is talking about the Bad Batch season 3. When I was saying, when we plan on reviewing it, right? Obviously, we're doing it live on Friday. And that was overwhelmingly the choice. 0% want it pre-recorded. 100% of you want it live on Friday night. Well, here you go. A few more votes on that Luke Skywalker versus Yoda poll. Before it was like 78% to like 22 or something. Now it's 75% Luke, 25% Yoda. So Luke is still vastly ahead, but now it's a little bit more round numbers. 3/4 of you for Luke, 1/4 of you for Yoda. So
it works in height too, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of works in, yeah, exactly. So either way, keep an eye out on the channel for any polls so you guys can participate in those. Some of them, of course, will be channel related, so we have a better direction of what it is you guys want. And then, of course, some of them will be, like that, where we just want you guys' opinion. We want to bring you guys into the discussion. And we definitely want to know your thoughts on Bad Batch. Season 3, episodes 1, 2, and 3. Monday, not really sure what we're going to talk about Monday, actually. But we do know that every Friday until this season is over, this is what we're going to be talking about. So next week, we're going to be talking about episode 4. I mean, unless they drop another 3 episodes, I don't know. And I'm also curious on if they're going to work almost like how Andor did, right? Like these little trilogies. That's going to be interesting. But either way, we'll be live Monday night, so be sure to check us out. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Saunders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.